They claim karma operates on its own timeline. For Reese Miller, a woman who had devoted 40 years to serving coffee on aching feet, that timeline appeared to have expired. At 62, isolated and precisely 3 days from homelessness, she perched on her deteriorating porch, anticipating the sheriff who would pile her belongings curbside, when a gleaming black Rolls-Royce Phantom glided onto her fractured driveway. Reese didn't recognize salvation. She assumed the police had arrived to arrest her. She was mistaken. The man emerging from that luxury vehicle wasn't law enforcement. He was a specter from 2009, clutching a ketchup-marked receipt valued at $40 million. This is the chronicle of how a $6 grilled cheese transformed history. The 14th of November, 2009. The night everything changed, rain in Akron. Ohio doesn't purify, it merely lubricates the grime. That evening, the heavens hung bruised purple, unleashing freezing downpours onto the Griddle's asphalt roof, a roadside establishment on East Market Street eternally scented with charred onions and floor polish. Reese Miller consulted the clock for the fourth instance in 10 minutes. The buzzing neon circle hummed louder than the refrigerator. She repositioned her apron, strings biting into a waistline expanded by 2 decades of consuming discarded food. At 32, Reese felt 50. Her blonde hair secured in a fraying scrunchie, her orthopedic shoes represented her sole luxury. Hey princess, less clock watching, more counter wiping. I don't compensate you for daydreaming. The abrasive voice belonged to Ed Kowalski, Big Ed to regulars, the Griddle's proprietor. Ed resembled a thumb with a temperament shorter than his neck. He dominated the rear booth, his designated throne, tallying the lunch receipts with greasy digits, snapping each bill. Working on it, Ed, Reese responded, her voice gravelly. She misted the laminate counter with blue disinfectant, erasing sticky coffee residue. Her thoughts weren't on cleaning. They fixated on the envelope concealed in her locker. The pink envelope, a cruel color choice for eviction warnings. 2 months delinquent. Her ex-husband Gary had vanished 3 weeks earlier, absconding with their savings, the television, and inexplicably the toaster. He'd abandoned Reese with maxed credit cards and a malfunctioning radiator in November. $14.50 in wrinkled tips occupied her apron pocket. She required $600 by Friday. The diner sat vacant except for old Jenkins in the corner, nursing coffee purchased 3 hours prior. The jukebox remained silent. Only Rain's relentless percussion against plate glass and Arthur's methodical grill, scraping disturbed the quiet. Arthur, the taciturn chain-smoking cook, never spoke. Reese approached the window, pressing her forehead against frigid glass, eyes shutting. Please, she whispered to whatever deity might acknowledge her. Just send something, a tourist bus, a generous drunk, anything. Opening her eyes revealed neither tourists nor drunks, but movement stirred in the alley across 4 traffic lanes. 2 shadows separating from brick, advancing with feral, jerky motions resembling stray cats. The orphans arrived. They sprinted across the road, disregarding crosswalks, splashing through ankle-deep puddles. As neon illumination captured them, shadows crystallized into forms. Children, 2 of them. A boy approximately 12 or 13, drowning in an oversized hoodie, sleeves saturated and trailing. The girl, no older than 7, trembled in a buttonless denim jacket over pajama bottoms, stuffed into rain boots. They paused outside the entrance. The boy examined the open 24 hours signage, observed his shivering sister, adjusted her hood, and with terrified resolve pushed through. The bell chimed, cheerful and inappropriate, as wind scattered soggy leaves across freshly mopped linoleum. Temperature plunged 10 degrees instantly. Reese froze, rag hovering midair. The boy immediately positioned himself as shield before his sister. His face mapped with grime, dirt smudges, grease, something dark resembling dried blood streaking his cheek. But his eyes blazed piercingly blue, intelligent, alert with feral awareness. He surveyed the room, identifying exits, assessing Ed in the back, evaluating Arthur at the grill. "We need a table," the boy announced, voice fracturing between childhood and adolescence. Ed glanced up from his cash, heavy brows furrowed. He perceived liabilities. He saw mud contaminating his floor. He saw non-paying vagrants. "Kitchen's closed," Ed barked, though the grill clearly remained operational. "Get lost." The girl recoiled, retreating behind her brother. She gripped a filthy stuffed rabbit by the ear. She appeared gray, not pale, but genuinely gray. Her lips were blue. Reese experienced a piercing maternal ache she'd suppressed since her miscarriage years earlier. "Ed, stop," Reese stated, voice low. She pivoted toward the boy. "The kitchen isn't closed. Take any seat you like." The boy scrutinized Reese, searching for deception. Detecting none, he nodded once and guided his sister to the most distant booth, shrouded in shadows. Reese collected menus and a water pitcher. Her hands trembled slightly. Approaching their table, the odor struck her. Damp wool, unwashed bodies, metallic fear. "Here," Reese said, pouring 2 glasses. The girl seized hers with both hands, draining it in 3 gulps. Reese immediately refilled it. "Take your time, it is warm inside." "We don't have much money," the boy stated abruptly. From his soaked hoodie emerged a handful of change. He deposited it on the table with a clatter, quarters, dimes, sticky pennies. "We have $3.40. Reese examined the pitiful pile of copper and silver. "It wouldn't cover a burger." "I am hungry, Leo," the little girl whispered. Her first words, her voice resembled dry leaves. "I know, Mia. I know," the boy Leo whispered back, brushing wet hair from her eyes. "We'll get something." Reese's heart fractured. The menu's cheapest item, grilled cheese, cost $4.50. The cheeseburger platter Mia indicated ran $8.95. "She'll have the grilled cheese. Just the sandwich. I am not hungry." Leo's stomach growled loud, angry echoing through the quiet booth. He flushed crimson, eyes dropping. Reese closed her eyes briefly. She contemplated the pink envelope in her purse. She considered the $14.50 in tips. Covering their meal meant departing with essentially nothing. No gas money tomorrow. Walking 3 miles in rain. She observed Mia's blue lips. She observed Leo's protective hand covering his sister's. "You know what?" Reese forced a smile she didn't feel. "You are fortunate. It is Tuesday. Kids eat free Tuesdays. Special promotion, management's initiative." Leo glanced up, suspicious. "I didn't see a sign. Just launched it." "Haven't posted the sign yet," Reese lied smoothly. "Order whatever you want. Burgers, fries, hot chocolate." Mia's eyes widened. "Hot chocolate with whipped cream, double whipped cream," Reese promised. "The sacrifice, hey," Ed's voice boomed across the diner. He was standing now, waddling toward them. "What are you doing, Reese?" "I heard that. There is no kids eat free night." "Who do you think you are, Charity?" Leo stiffened, sliding from the booth to position himself between Ed and Mia. His hand dove into his pocket. For one terrifying instant, Reese thought he might possess a weapon. His hand merely clenched into a fist. Ed stopped at the table, sneering at the coins. $3 won't even cover the heat you are letting in. Get out now before I summon the cops." "They are customers, Ed," Reese stated, stepping before the table. She measured 5'4" against his 6'2", but rage fueled her. "They're ordering food. They can't pay." "I am paying." Reese yanked her entire night's tips from her apron, crumpled ones and fives, slamming them beside Leo's coins. "They're $15. That covers 2 burger platters and 2 hot chocolates. Now sit down and let me do my job." The diner fell silent. Arthur, the cook, emerged from the kitchen, observing. Old Man Jenkins ceased sipping coffee. Ed stared at the money, then at Reese. His face transformed to a dangerous purple shade. He swept the bills off the table, shoving them into his pocket. "Fine," Ed spat. "But if they make a mess, you are cleaning it with your toothbrush. And don't expect more shifts this week, Reese. You just earned yourself a 3-day suspension. He stomped back to his office. The door slam rattled napkin holders. Reese stood there, breathing hard. She'd just forfeited 3 days' pay, the rent money. The end eviction guaranteed now. She turned back to the kids. Leo stared at her with unsettling intensity. Not grateful, shocked. "Why did you do that?" he asked quietly. "You don't know us. I know you are hungry," Reese said, voice trembling slightly. "Sit down. I'll get your hot chocolate." She brought out the food. Massive burgers, mountainous piles of steaming fries, mugs of cocoa, overflowing with whipped cream. She watched them eat. It wasn't eating, it was consuming. They devoured with frantic velocity as though food might evaporate mid-chew. Mia got ketchup everywhere. Leo consumed half his burger, then halted, wrapped the remainder in a napkin, shoved it into his pocket. "Eat it all, honey," Reese said gently. "I can make another to go." Leo looked at her. "We can't repay you. I didn't ask you to." They finished in 20 minutes. Rain had diminished to drizzle outside. Leo stood, wiping his mouth with his hands back. "Thank you," Mia whispered, hugging Reese's leg. The girl smelled like rain and dirt, but underneath sweet cocoa. Leo stood before her. He appeared older now, fed. He reached into his pocket. Reese thought he was retrieving the wrapped burger. Instead, he extracted a small, folded paper, pressing it into her hand. "What is it?" "Collateral," Leo said, eyes locked on hers. "My name is Leo Vance. This is my sister, Mia. We're going to find our aunt in Chicago. But I never forget a debt. Ever. Leo, it is just a burger." "It is not just a burger," he said fiercely. "You saved us." "Nobody saves us." He grabbed Mia's hand. "Come on, Mia. We need to move before the blue car returns." Just like that, they vanished. The bell jingled. The doors swung shut. Reese stood in the middle of the diner with a dirty table, an empty apron, and a suspension that would cost her home. She examined the paper in her hand, not a diary page. A Polaroid photo, aged and creased, displaying a beautiful woman beside a distinctive vintage 1960s Rolls Royce Silver Cloud. On the back in messy handwriting, "Property of the Vance Family Trust, if found. Call 555-0199. She didn't call the number. She didn't believe it was real. She tucked the photo into her pocket, completed her shift, and walked 3 miles home in rain. She lost her apartment 2 weeks later, 2010 to 2024. The lost years, the years following that rainy November night, didn't deliver karma. They delivered gravity, pulling everything in Reese's life downward. 2 weeks after feeding Leo and Mia, Reese was terminated. Ed didn't manage it face-to-face. He left a note taped to her locker declaring her services no longer required due to theft. He labeled the free meal theft. Without references and amid economic collapse, Reese lost her apartment. Winter 2010 found her sleeping in her 1998 Ford Taurus parked behind Walmart. She mastered homelessness's brutal rhythms, washing hair in McDonald's sinks, layering 3 pairs of socks against frostbite, the humiliating invisibility of food pantry lines when you used to be the one serving. By 2012, she'd scraped together enough for a studio, a converted garage with no insulation on the town's outskirts. She secured employment at Patty's Pancake House, a downgrade from the griddle, polyester uniforms that didn't breathe, tips in quarters, not dollars. Reese aged, not gracefully, it was erosion. Her knees, punished by decades on concrete floors, began swelling permanently. The free clinic doctor labeled it severe osteoarthritis, recommended knee replacement surgery. He might as well have recommended moon travel. Surgery cost $40,000. Reese had $400 in a coffee can under her sink. She started consuming ibuprofen like candy, chewing 4 at a time just to survive 6-hour shifts. Through it all, she kept the Polaroid. It migrated from car to garage to a moldy basement apartment in 2015. She tacked it to her mirror. The Rolls-Royce image faded to sepia in sunlight. The phone number 555-0199 remained uncalled. Sometimes late at night, when leg pain prevented sleep, she'd talk to the picture. "I hope you made it to Chicago, Leo," she'd whisper to empty rooms. "I hope you got that hot chocolate." She never genuinely believed the Vance family trust was real. She assumed it was a child's fantasy, a coping mechanism for a street boy. She kept the photo not as a lottery ticket, but as proof that she was a good person in a world that told her she was trash. That photo was evidence that she'd once saved someone. 2020 to 2024, the breaking point. Then came the pandemic. For the world, tragedy. For Reese, a death sentence. Patty's Pancake House closed its doors in March 2020 for just 2 weeks. It never reopened. At 60 years old, with no computer skills, no savings, and a destroyed back, Reese had nothing. She applied for unemployment. The system clogged. Checks were lost. Delays cascaded. She burned through meager savings in 3 months. Stopped buying meat. Stopped buying fresh vegetables. Her diet became rice, beans, discounted bread. She found odd jobs. Cleaned houses for people terrified to admit her inside, scrubbing their floors in masks that made breathing difficult. Walked dogs for wealthy Heights families, dragging painful legs up hills for $10 hourly. It wasn't enough. By 2023, she'd moved to a dilapidated rental on Miller Road. A shack, really rotten wood siding, a roof leaking into buckets when it rained, a porch leaning dangerously left. But rent was $600, and the landlord, a slumlord named Gorski, didn't require credit checks. She was surviving, barely, like a swimmer treading water, mid-ocean, waiting for muscles to finally surrender. The 17th of October, 2024. The return, the end, didn't arrive with a bang. It came as a certified letter. Reese sat on her porch, the only peaceful house section, staring at the paper. Autumn wind stripped oak leaves, sending them skittering across cracked concrete. Notice to vacate. Gorski had sold the land. A developer was coming to bulldoze. The shacks build luxury condos. The Miller Road lofts, they'd be called. She had 72 hours. She was 64 years old. 72 hours, she said aloud. Her voice sounded rusty. She had nowhere to go. The car was long gone, sold for scrap 2 years ago when the transmission died. No family, parents dead. No children, no friends. Poverty isolates, and she'd been too ashamed to maintain connections. It was 4:15 p.m. Deadline, 5 p.m. Rain started again. Cold, miserable drizzle, just like that night in 2009. Reese closed her eyes. She felt crushing weight on her chest. Not a heart attack, despair. Pure, unadulterated despair. She'd worked hard every single day of her life. Been kind, been honest. And this was her reward, sitting on a rotting porch, waiting to become a statistic. Then she heard it. Not the sound of normal cars. Most vehicles on Miller Road were rusted sedans or pickup trucks with bad mufflers. This sound was different. A low, powerful purr. A deep, resonant thrum vibrating in her chest. It sounded like a lion clearing its throat. Reese opened her eyes, turning the corner onto the muddy pothole. Street was a vehicle resembling something from a movie screen. Black. Not just black, a black so deep it absorbed surrounding light. Massive, with a front grille resembling a bank vault entrance. The Spirit of Ecstasy hood ornament gleamed silver against gray sky. A Rolls-Royce Phantom. It prowled down the street, dodging potholes with eerie grace. It appeared alien against the backdrop of peeling paint and chain-link fences. The car slowed, crept past the house next door. The turn signal flashed. Reese held her breath. The massive car turned into her driveway. Tires crunched broken concrete. It stopped 10 feet from her porch. The engine cut. Silence followed, heavy and profound. Reese didn't move, couldn't. She gripped the cardboard box handle so hard her knuckles whitened. The back door opened. not a uniformed driver. Instead, a young man stepped from the rear passenger seat, tall, well over 6 feet, wearing a charcoal gray suit tailored perfectly to broad shoulders, a long black overcoat against rain, dark hair slicked back, sharp angular jawline. He looked powerful, wealthy, like he owned the entire city. He opened a black umbrella, shielding himself from rain. He walked toward the porch, dress shoes splashing heedlessly into mud puddles. He stopped at the stairs' bottom and looked up. Reese looked into his eyes and breath left her lungs. Blue, piercing, intelligent, striking blue eyes. The same eyes that had scanned the diner for exits 15 years ago. The man didn't smile. He looked at the boxes beside her. At the eviction notice taped to the door, a muscle twitched in his jaw. Then he reached into his pocket. Reese thought he was pulling out a wallet. Instead, he produced a small, tattered object wrapped in plastic. He slowly unwrapped it, revealing a dry, half-eaten cheeseburger bun, petrified by time, hard as rock. He held it up. "I believe," the man said, voice deep and smooth, "that I still owe you for the other half of this." Reese stood, hand flying to her mouth. "Leo," the man finally smiled. Not the guarded, terrified smile of the hoodie-wearing boy. A smile of triumph. "Hello, Reese," Leo said. "I brought the car, just like I promised." Rain drummed rhythmically against the Rolls-Royce roof. Inside, silence was absolute. Hand-stitched leather and walnut wood. The faint scent of expensive cologne and new money. Reese sat in the back seat, stunned. Her dirty cardboard boxes were in the trunk. Her rough, trembling hands rested on the softest leather she'd ever touched. Leo Vance sat across from her, long legs crossed. He opened a crystal decanter from a hidden compartment, poured water. "Drink," he said gently. "You look like you are in shock." Reese took the glass. Her teeth clattered against the rim. "Leo, I don't understand. The car, the suit, how?" Leo's face softened. The sharp corporate mask slipped away, revealing the boy who'd once guarded his sister in a diner booth. "It is a long story, Reese. But we have time. Finally, we have time." He leaned forward. "Do you remember the name on the photo's back? The Vance Family Trust?" Reese nodded, patting her pocket where the photo still rested. "It wasn't a fantasy," Leo said, voice hardening. "My father was Richard Vance. He owned Vance Logistics, one of the largest shipping companies in the Midwest. We lived in a mansion in Shaker Heights. We had everything. But in 2008, my parents died in a private plane crash." Reese gasped. "Oh, Leo, I am so sorry." "That wasn't the worst part," Leo continued, blue eyes darkening. "The worst part was my uncle Marcus. He was executor of the estate, supposed to care for us until I turned 25. Instead, he tried to erase us." Leo looked out the window at Reese's rotting porch. "He wanted the trust fund, about $60 million, but he couldn't touch it as long as Mia and I were alive, and in his care. So he hired a fixer to take us to a boarding school in remote Montana, a place for troubled youth. He was going to have us declared mentally incompetent." Reese felt a chill, unrelated to her damp clothes. "We ran," Leo said simply. "The night we came into your diner, we'd been on the run for 3 weeks. Hitchhiking, sleeping in barns, hiding in truck stops. We were starving, Reese, truly starving. We'd been turned away from 3 restaurants before we found the griddle. One owner threatened to spray us with a hose." He looked at her intensely. "When we walked into your diner, I had a knife in my pocket. I was ready to use it. I told myself that if anyone tried to hurt Mia, I would kill them. I was 12 years old, and I was ready to become a murderer." Reese's hand flew to her mouth. "Leo." "But I didn't have to," Leo said softly. "Because you didn't see thieves. You didn't see trash. You saw children. You fed us. You stood up to that monster Ed, and you gave us your own money." He reached into his inner suit pocket, pulled out a sleek smartphone. He tapped the screen, turned it around. A live video feed showed a beautiful young woman in a white coat walking down a hospital corridor. Confident, radiant. "Mia," Reese whispered. "Dr. Mia Vance," Leo corrected with a proud smile. "She is a pediatric surgeon at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. She saves kids every single day, and she does it because she remembers what it felt like to be helpless." Leo turned the phone off. "We made it to Chicago that week. Found our Aunt Catherine. She took us in, hired the best lawyers from Baker McKenzie, fought my uncle for 5 years. We got everything back. The company, the house, the legacy. Uncle Marcus is currently serving 20 years in federal prison for fraud and embezzlement." Reese wiped a tear from her cheek. "I am so glad. I prayed for you every night. For years. But we didn't know your last name. We only knew Reese. We went back to the griddle in 2012, but it was gone, burned down in an insurance fire. Ed had disappeared. Records were destroyed. We hired private investigators, but without a surname or social security number, it was impossible." "So how?" Reese gestured to the car. "How did you find me?" "The photo," Leo said. "Last month, I did an interview with Forbes magazine about my shipping empire. They asked about my most prized possession. I told them about the Polaroid I gave to a waitress in Akron. I described it in detail. I described you." He paused. "A nurse at the free clinic on 4th Street read the article. She remembered a patient with severe arthritis who carried an old Polaroid of a Rolls-Royce in her purse. She called my office 3 days ago." Leo leaned back, expression turning steely. "I flew in from London this morning, came straight here, and I arrived just in time to see this." He pointed to the eviction notice on her door. "You are not homeless, Reese," Leo said firmly. "Not anymore. But before we leave, I have some business to attend to." Justice, a beat-up Ford F-150 rattled down the street, screeching to a halt behind the Rolls-Royce. The door swung open. A man stepped out. Gorski, the landlord, thick-set, in a stained windbreaker, smelling of stale cigar smoke. 2 younger men in work boots followed, hired muscle to clear out the trash. Gorski stared at the Rolls-Royce, jaw-dropping. He looked at the chauffeur standing stoically by the door. Then at Reese's porch. "Hey," Gorski shouted, marching up the driveway. "Whose car is this? You blocking the driveway?" "I got work to do here." Leo opened the car door, stepped out. He didn't use the umbrella this time. Let rain hit his expensive suit, unbothered. He stood a full head taller than Gorski. "Mr. Gorski, I presume," Leo said. His voice was calm, but it carried terrifying weight. Gorski faltered, intimidated by the sheer aura of wealth radiating from Leo. "Yeah. Who are you?" "You a lawyer for the old lady. Look, the eviction is legal. She is out. 5 p.m. That is the law." Reese stepped out of the car, standing behind Leo. She felt small, but for the first time in years, she didn't feel afraid. "The law," Leo repeated, testing the word. "You seem to care a great deal about the law, Mr. Gorski, which is interesting, considering the state of this property." Leo pulled a folded document from his coat. "I had my team pull the city records on this address while I was en route. No certificate of occupancy since 2018, multiple citations for black mold, faulty wiring, exposed lead paint. You've been collecting rent illegally on a condemned building for 6 years." Gorski's face turned red. "Now listen here, rich boy." "No. You listen." Leo stepped closer, invading Gorski's space. "My name is Leo Vance. I own Vance Global Logistics. I have a team of 12 corporate attorneys who are currently bored. If you touch one single item of Reese's belongings, I will sue you not just for the illegal rent, but for reckless endangerment, emotional distress, and fraud." Gorski took a step back. I sold the place anyway. The developers are taking it tomorrow." "Actually, they aren't," Leo said, his smile razor sharp. He snapped his fingers. His chauffeur, a man named Thomas, stepped forward, handed Leo a thick folder. "I bought the development contract an hour ago," Leo said, tossing the folder onto the wet hood of Gorski's truck. "I paid a premium. The Miller Road Lofts project is cancelled. I now own this land. I own this house." He paused. "And effectively, Mr. Gorski, I own you." Gorski looked at the folder, then at Reese. He looked like a deflated balloon. "You bought the whole block for her." "For her," Leo said. "Now get in your truck. If I see you on this street again, I'll have your rental license revoked in every county in Ohio." Gorski scrambled backward, tripping over his own feet. He signaled to his two men, already backing away. They jumped into the Ford and peeled away, tires spinning in mud, fleeing the judgment of the Rolls-Royce. Reese stood on wet pavement, rain mingling with tears on her face. She looked at the rotting house that had been her prison. "What are you going to do with it?" she asked. "Burn it down," Leo said with satisfaction. "I am going to bulldoze this shack and build a community center here. A place where kids can get a free meal without anyone asking questions. We'll call it the Reese Miller Center." Reese shook her head, overwhelmed. "Leo, I can't. This is too much. I am just a waitress." Leo turned to her, grabbing her hands. His grip was warm and strong. "You are not just a waitress. You are the woman who saved my life for $6. You invested in me when the whole world wrote me off. Now I am paying out the dividends." He opened the back door of the Rolls-Royce. Again, "Get in, Reese. We have a flight to catch. A flight." "To Baltimore," Leo said. "Mia is waiting. She has cooked dinner, and I believe she promised you a hot chocolate with double whipped cream." Reese looked back one last time at the street where she'd almost died of loneliness. Then she looked at the man who'd returned from the past to save her. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's go." The reunion as the car pulled away, sliding silently through rain. Reese Miller left her poverty behind forever. The flight was a blur of comfort she couldn't have imagined. A private Gulfstream jet, a hot meal served on china, a seat that transformed into a bed. When they landed in Baltimore, a limousine waited on the tarmac. They drove 30 minutes to a gated estate in the countryside. The house was massive, a sprawling Georgian manor lit against the night sky. But it wasn't the size that mattered to Reese. It was the person standing on the front steps. A young woman stood there, same dark hair as Leo, but softer features, wearing a thick wool sweater and jeans. No shoes. She'd run out in socks. The car stopped. Reese got out. "Mia." The woman burst into tears, ran down the steps. She collided with Reese, wrapping her arms around her in a hug so tight it threatened to crack Reese's ribs. "You are here," Mia sobbed into Reese's shoulder. "You are actually here." Reese held her. She smelled the same clean soap and rain, but she wasn't a shivering child anymore. She was a strong, beautiful woman. "I found you," Reese whispered, crying freely now. "I always wondered. We never forgot," Mia said, pulling back to look at her. "Not for a single day." She pulled a necklace from under her sweater. Hanging from the gold chain was a small, cheap plastic charm, a tiny hamburger. "It came with the kids' meal," Mia laughed through tears. "I kept it. It was my lucky charm through medical school." Leo walked up beside them, smiling. "I think we should go inside. It is freezing." They walked into the house. It was warm. A fire crackled in the massive stone fireplace. And there on the coffee table was a silver tray. On the tray were 3 mugs, oversized, steaming, piled impossibly high with whipped cream. "Double whipped cream," Mia said, wiping her eyes. "Just like you promised." Reese sat down on the velvet sofa. She took a sip, sweet, warm, perfect. The pain in her knees seemed to fade away. The fear of the eviction notice, the hunger, the loneliness, it all dissolved in the sugar and warmth. She looked at Leo sitting in the armchair, at Mia sitting on the rug at her feet. She wasn't a waitress anymore. She wasn't a charity case. She was family. Epilogue. The legacy Reese Miller didn't just survive. She thrived. With access to top-tier medical care, she got her knee replacement surgery. 3 months of physical therapy for the first time in 20 years. She could walk without pain. She didn't want to simply sit in a mansion. Leo tried to tell her she never had to work again. But Reese was stubborn. She took over the estate kitchen. She didn't cook for the family. They had a chef for that. But she started baking. Cookies, pies, her famous apple strudel. Every Sunday she and Mia would load up the SUV and drive to the local children's shelter. They didn't just drop off food, they served it. Reese stood behind the counter, not as a servant, but as a grandmother figure to 100 kids who had no one else. Leo kept his promise too. The Reese Miller Community Center opened in Akron on the site of her old shack. It provides 500 free meals a day. Above the door is a plaque that reads, "Kindness is the only investment that never fails." Reese often sits on the patio of the manor watching sunsets. She still keeps the Polaroid of the Rolls-Royce in her wallet, right next to a new picture, a photo of her, Leo, and Mia laughing at a graduation ceremony. She realized that the luxury car wasn't the reward. The money wasn't the reward. The reward was the love that came back to her, multiplied 1,000 times over, proving that even in a dark, rainy world, a simple grilled cheese sandwich can still save a life. The end. Ensue.